by now. Hi, Angie. I'm Kim McCullough. I'm from Toronto. I read your book in 2 days, which I'm giving myself a pat on the back because I have 3 kids, 6 and under. So
But so, just in a nutshell, like what are your 2 or 3 or one main takeaways and/or your husband's that would have been better for you as parents and for your son as kids?
I think that families have to be vigilant about making sure they have a balanced attitude towards youth sports and making sure they're advocating for their own children and making sure they're keeping an eye on how things are working. And I think too often we all just get pulled along with the machinery. And so we enter into hockey and it just sort of gets a little bit out of perspective and a little bit too intense and a little bit, not about the fun or not about the kids or just focusing on the good kids at such a young age. And I think parents need to make sure that's not happening, because what happens in a small town, the parents who are the most intense and the most convinced their kids are going to the NHL at age 6, they're the ones who grab the reins, and so they're doing all the work. They're doing the raffle tables, they're washing the jerseys, they're booking the ice time, and then you feel like, oh, I can't really complain because they're doing everything. I think everybody needs to get more involved, including the parents with a more moderate attitude, and I think that would keep things in check. Like Wally said, I think people are there with good intentions and they start with good intentions, and we just have to keep checking in with each other. Is this about fun? Are the kids getting a multi-sport introduction to sports? Is everybody getting fair ice time? Are people learning the basic skills? And not, remember, the NHL is way down the road. And then the other thing is the training for coaches. Because I've just recently gone back to swimming, I'm having to redo my certification for Swim Canada, and it's all about this kind of stuff. The NCCP level 1 and level 2 is all about being sensible. I mean, it's called this being sensible, right? Remembering children are children, letting children have childhood, making sure the sport's about them, not about the parents living vicariously. So yeah, be vigilant at the family level and not let someone else run away with it and just get pulled along. I think too many people get pulled along into the craziness.
Parental instruction as much as coaching instruction, and I guess,
yeah.
I mean, we kind of know that. I guess how do we crack that nut? Short of demanding all parents attend sort of a informational session about fairness, development for all, fun, at whatever level, whether it's at all levels in minor hockey or whether it's Bantam AAA where it gets to be more elite. But I don't know how else to crack that nut.
Yeah. I'm writing a series of articles for Active for Life. If you just Google Active for Life, Angie Abdou, you'll come up with a page, but it's just, I'm interviewing Olympians, and then every month I do an Olympian, and then I pull out parenting lessons. And so far the ones published have been Carol Wynn on wrestling, and Martha McCabe on swimming, and who was my first one? Shame on me for forgetting. But they just pull out these exact kind of lessons, and so Active for Life is really on it. And I think there's lots of different, the hockey conference that happened at University of Alberta last time, but they're really on it. So I feel like there's these little groups that are trying to educate people. The problem is, does the average hockey parent sitting in the stands, are they reading the Active for Life articles or reading the academic articles or reading the kinds of things you guys are talking about? Probably not. So how, like you say, how do we filter that down other than making mandatory education programs, which might just be laughed at, or pamphlets. I guess you just keep putting the message out there and hope that eventually enough people catch on that that's the mass, right? Like just keep. What did Richard Monet, who's the head of Active for Life, he talked about that the vocal minorities running the show. He said most people want this for their kids. They want a healthy sport environment. They want multi-sport. They want to, not put pressure on until much later. But the vocal minority is the one running the show. So I think the more people we can get involved and have that majority who just wants a healthy, balanced sport experience for their kids running the show instead of letting the few grab the reins.
I guess kind of like coaching a team with kids at all different skill levels. And we've often talked about you got to coach the parents, and repetition is the biggest piece.
Yeah, and I do for swimming, we do a monthly newsletter. So I've started linking on these sport parent, even though I do the sport parent rules for Active for Life and it with a very, very different hat on, I just keep linking those in. And I think if that's the culture and that's the message, then parents do get embarrassed. General message is let's all be sane and balanced and have fun and treat children like children. The ones who are getting to get too caught up, they get a bit, they get held in check just by the general culture. So I just keep putting the message out there however I can.
Angie, I just wanted to mention you did the mission statement exercise with me, and then we've had 2 or 3 conversations following that. That's the piece that in 1990 we're hoping to see we can get re-implemented, ethical coaching applied through coaches as they go up the education ladder. I really think that's the only way you're going to make a lasting impact over time.
Going back to what I put in the chat when we were chatting about something different, but the stresses that are on parents and situations to get their kids on time. I think back in the day when I played, and if you're late, that you didn't get to play the first period, like things like that I never thought about how hard that probably was on my parents. And so as coaches, being cognizant of the family dynamic, and you really talk really well in the book about just how it pulls you apart from your partner too when you have different goals or aspirations from the partner, and how hard that is. Like, so as coaches, being really understanding and having that conversation with the parents too, like, what is easy for you? What is hard for you? Like, how can we make this a better situation for you and your kids, or multiple kids, or things like that? So I really appreciate that you alluded to that. And, I can already see it at 5 years of age with my husband. You have different choices that you would make. So coming to an agreement always means somebody is not getting what they want, right? And so it's certainly hard. And I can imagine with multiple kids trying to get them to all different rinks, and you're just never seeing your partner. And yeah, anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, just middle-class families are working their heads off to pay for it all. So both parents are working full-time, probably have tons of job stress, and then driving different kids to different towns for different competitions and for practices. And there's a few years when the kids that kind of middle age that we felt stretched so thin, and the last thing we had time for was our marriage. so that suffered, and then it's a stressful, fighty environment on top of it all. So it was not really a good years around here. And not
so
that
maybe
that's
you could have something for the coaches to, you have that intake interviews with the kids, and you have all these forms. But is there something something the coaches or organizations can provide for assistance for families mentally?
Yeah.
Like.
Well, I think more carpooling, even helping people arrange more carpooling and stuff. Because, right now, or the way it was before COVID, all the families would drive to the rink and all the families would drive home. And now that the kids are older, they kind of organize their own, like, oh, I'll get a ride with Giles, or I'll get a ride with so and so. And then, we only end up driving every couple of weeks instead. And now, and I don't know. And I don't think that needs to be on the team, but I guess, and it's not like I was blaming, I mean, part of the book is this bad thread of my marriage, which, because it's a personal memoir too, and it's not like I'm blaming hockey for my marriage, obviously, but just I'm sort of saying it's part of the reason I felt like it was part of the book is because it's part of how, as middle class sporty families, we throw ourselves so fully into our organized sports with our kids, and we just follow this excessive kind of model that everybody's following, instead of being, well, what is going to make our family happiest? What is going to keep our kids
Mhm.
healthiest? What is going to, like, put those questions first instead of the like mad race to keep up with everybody. And I think that I'm not saying that's on the job of the coaches but on the job of the family. So I'm hoping, I guess with my book, I'm making the point that each family needs to be vigilant. What are we trying to get out of sport? What are we trying to get out of family life? These years go so fast. Before you know it, your kids are grown up and asking if they can take the car, and it's shocking. They're taller than you are. It's shocking. So enjoy those years, but are we enjoying them by running around like chickens with our head cut off to make all the different practices and all the different competitions and all the different, I don't think so. So I think there's just keeping vigilant about asking yourself, are we doing what's best for a happy family life right now?
I think too, what I got out of it was just the really communication aspect of it and celebrating the small wins, celebrating that with somebody rather than it being a competition with, when one parent is with one kid and the other one's with the other kid, and you're not doing this or you are doing this, and but really celebrating the wins and sharing what your kid is doing, because that's ultimately where the joy is, right? Is watching your kid have fun doing something.
And we really did a divide and conquer approach, which was because my husband just was like, no way, I'm not doing this. I live in Fernie to ski. I'm not driving all the way to Golden to sit in a hockey rink all weekend. He's flat out no. And I was from like, but I love sports. And if my son loves this sport, then I'm going to do that for him because my parents did it for me. So I totally did it. And my husband stayed home and went skiing with our daughter. So because of that divide and conquer, I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I got very distant from my daughter because I wasn't home. I was in hockey rinks. And so that took some rectifying once I realized that. I was like, oh my gosh, we need some mother-daughter time here pronto. So we didn't handle it the best way in those years. It's easy to say that retrospectively, but.
Well, I think, Angie, the divide and conquer is very prevalent from what I've seen in minor hockey. If they've got multiple kids, it's, the mom's always taking the daughter somewhere, the dad's always taking somewhere. But as you guys are having this conversation, and I definitely remember this part of the book because, often I'm coaching, but I'm not coaching my own kids yet. And, it struck me about, obviously the division of responsibilities between my husband and I, because I'm off coaching someone else's kids and he's with our kids. And so there's that, mom guilt, whatever you want to call it, that side of it. But I was watching, I don't watch a lot of like cheesy TV, but I was watching Last Chance U, which if you're not familiar with it is basically profiles coaches and teams it's on Netflix, of kind of these kids who are on their last chance to really get a scholarship. So it's all junior colleges. And so it kind of delves into the life of the players, who are all 18, 19, 20. I'm not sure how they all are, but they're all adults, and the coaches. And this current coach, which is at a basketball school, I think in LA, very passionate coach, like reminds me of myself, like jumping in the drills, banging on the floor, like really into it. And, the team is lackluster, not performing, and he gets extremely emotional. And, the players look like they don't want to be there. And he starts saying, like, I missed my son's basketball game to be here. I missed my daughter's, dance to be here and coach you guys. And that really hit home for me, in addition to what you were saying about the divide and conquer, is I think there has to be a little bit of an understanding. A lot of the coaches who are coaching in minor hockey are volunteers and parents of coaches or players on the team. There's a very small subset of us who are paid coaches who are coaching someone else's kids, and our kids are off doing something else. So, I appreciated the insight from that, in those stories in your book. And then I was as the way the universe works, immediately met by this episode in The Last Chance U of this coach, like basically crying in front of all these 20-year-old guys, talking about, what he was giving up to be there as well. So I just think it's an important sentiment to keep out there, because I think it's something that just gets swept under the rug for wins and losses and practices and all those types of things. So I appreciate that in the book. It was very insightful.
Thank you. I hope you get a chance to coach your own kids, Kim. It's so fun. I didn't count on that either, how fun it is to coach my own kids. And I've told them right away, like, they don't have to call me mom. If they don't want to, they can call me Coach Angie like everyone else, and that I will treat them the same as everyone else. But it's a really fun way to connect with them just at that. Like, now my daughter is 12 and my son is 14 now. So they're kind of at that age where they would be pulling away a bit. But suddenly I get to spend all this time with them and see them really improve at a sport they're enjoying. And it's pretty rewarding.
Angie, swimming, are you paid for your coaching position?
I'm unmuting myself. It is a paid position. When I stepped in this year, I've said I would do it volunteer, partly because I was on the board. And so if I got paid, I'd have to get off the board. And at the time, it was supposed to be sort of a short-term solution. So it's normally they get paid $30 an hour or something. So for whatever, 20 hours a week. So it's not a livable wage, but normally they do pay. So I'm saving the club some money in these hard times, and I'm doing it totally volunteer. But I was just thinking I was going to do it this year, but now I remember that I love it. So I want to keep doing it. But I would like to be able to do it volunteer because it's not my main job, and I don't know. But it is a paid job typically.
Yeah.
I just love that you said, now I remember that I loved it.
I love it so much. It's like I do this thing where I fluctuate back and forth between like athletics and creativity, and I need to find a way, like I can be a writer and a coach, or a writer and an athlete, and I'm always trying to balance those two. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Like, I love everything about it. I love working with teenagers. I love it. They're so interesting, and they're just so responsive to people other than their parents. Like, I will say sometimes to some of my friends whose kids are on the team, I'll be like, wow, I love working with your daughter. She's so, when I give her technique feedback, she responds like this, and she's so polite, and they're like, our daughter, like, that's not what we're seeing at home right now. So it's really nice for them to know that even though their teenagers are going through this phase where they're grumpy and miserable at home, they're lovely human beings out in the world. And I just love it. I love everything about it. I love swimming. So to be able to share my passion for a sport with teenagers at a time that it's really going to get them through some rough years, if they can stick with it, I just love it. Yeah. Some kids just miss the real head-to-head competition, and so that's just the reality of a small club with wildly different abilities, and we find ways to deal with it.
How did the parents, did they miss the competition?
Terribly, and I think they miss, not for bad reasons. I think a lot of parents, that becomes their whole social life, traveling around with the kids, and it's really fun. It's a fun way to spend time with your children. It's really expensive. I think we've all realized how much money we're saving this year, but yeah, they miss that, becomes their whole social life as parents, and it's evaporated. They miss it terribly, as bad as the kids. And I don't even mean that in a negative, vicarious living kind of way. I just mean they've committed to driving their kids around, and this has become their life, and it's not there anymore.
The way things have changed, and we've talked about this different times, and that parents have basically replaced many of their own personal pursuits with their children's. And if you go back as I would like to say, as not that long ago as when I was a player in minor hockey, where you had carpooling and things like that, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, and carpooling and buses, and when I swam, we always got billeted, so you just stayed at a stranger's house, which you can see why we don't do that anymore. But the money that families spend now on hotel rooms, and like the whole family going to restaurants all weekend, it's out of hand, out of control.
You're also right, Angie, that it becomes a social network of your friends, you know, like
Yep.
I'm just entering into the foray with our kids just being new into sport. And that really is a fun part of it. You know, meeting new
Yeah.
people from different backgrounds as adults, you don't get to do in very many situations. So, you know, creating new friendships is something that is really fun. It's a really great part of it.
The shortening of the bench is probably the biggest thing, and I don't know what degree that occurred, Angie, where the best players just got way more ice time and nobody said anything. But that's not building confidence, building self-esteem. That's at that age with young players, it's trying to win the game because some kids happen to be maybe have a better birth date, be more mature, or invested private money at the young age. And now they're getting all the ice time and other kids are being left out. And the whole negative experience, as happened in your boy's case, they quit the sport. It wasn't fun. They didn't get to play and they didn't gain anything from the experience that they enjoyed. So any comments there, Angie?
Yeah, so I realized that some of the comments in my book are naive, and people who know more about hockey than I will do, which is almost everybody, will find them naive. But so one of the things is I argue against tiering, and I wasn't obviously you need tiering. Obviously you can't have kids from all different levels on the ice or it won't work. But I was thinking more of my specific community. So we're a very small town. I live in Fernie. We have 5,000 or 6,000 people. So there's enough at those young ages for 2 teams. And so the parents whose kids are good, like good 8-year-olds, they really want to make a good team and a not so good team. And then we end up in leagues where our kids are traveling to you know, Golden for a league game. Golden is a 3.5-hour drive in December, January, February. We're traveling to Whitefish for a league game. Like we're traveling across an international border to do a league game. So I always said the kids aren't that different. Like even when they did tryouts, I think they said they rated the kids 1 to 10, and out of all the kids, they were 6 to an 8 or a 6 to a 9 or something, right? So there's not a huge difference between the kids. I said, why don't we divide them into 2 equal teams? Then we can at least have some home games. We can have kids not traveling so much. We can not spend so much time on dangerous winter roads. We can save people money. You know, it's just a lot of reasons why that makes more sense for families. But those parents so invested in their kids being the good kids, they just had to have a good team and a bad team. Like they just had to have it. So I realize when I say no tiering, I'm talking about a very specific community with a specific group of kids. But it's that same mentality, Wally, you're talking about. You know, the good kids play more. The good kids are on the good team. They're 8, right? We don't have any idea who. I love this story recently on this thread where someone talked. I know the name. You're going to correct me. You're going to be able to fill it in because I'm having a blank.
Mike Kennedy.
Mike Kennedy talked about being drafted from the UBC onto the NHL, and nobody would have predicted that when he was in grade 12, right? You don't know who's going to be good, and sometimes the little kids, the small kids, are very dexterous and they are really good. And when they're young, or they're good, learn skating faster, and they look amazing with the other kids who are just learning to skate. But when they're 12, you can't even pick them out of the pile. So we don't know who's going to be good, and that doesn't need to be the emphasis at age 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's all. Now I'm ranting. I get a bit ranty on that topic. And I remind myself of that because as a coach, now I can get really excited when someone starts showing a little promise or suddenly has a leap in ability, and I have to, you know, remember, okay, I can be excited that this child's improving, but there's no reason that that child who I haven't seen a leap for in a year might have their leap next month. You know, they get strong at different times. They catch on to the feel of the water at the different times. They are really awkward in their bodies at different times. So you just keep an eye on all of them, and how can I help them all improve? And it's different. Like sometimes I'll notice, oh my goodness, this child has the fastest kick I've ever seen, but they're not using it in their stroke, and no other coach has even noticed the kick. But if I can get them to use that kick in their stroke, they're going to have a big burst. But if I'm not looking at that child because they're at the back of the lane and my attention's all at the person on the front of the lane, I might never see that. And that child might go their whole life without knowing that they have a superhuman kick that they can also use when they're swimming if they figure out how. So you have to keep your eyes open as a coach, open on everybody, and get rid of this kid is good and this kid isn't good. I try really to never use the word talent at that age, because each child has talents and our job is to find what they are.
But so, just in a nutshell, like what are your 2 or 3 or one main takeaways and or your husband's that would have been better for you as parents and for your son as kids?
I think that families have to be vigilant about making sure they have a balanced attitude towards youth sports, and making sure they're advocating for their own children, and making sure they're keeping an eye on how things are working. And I think too often we all just get pulled along with the machinery, and so we enter into hockey and it just sort of gets a little bit out of perspective and a little bit too intense and a little bit, not about the fun or not about the kids, or just focusing on the good kids at such a young age. And I think parents need to make sure that's not happening.